Hope everybody is doing well. Definitely, it is a wonderful Monday afternoon here in Durham, North Carolina, and all along those lines. So, definitely, folks are paying attention to a number of things in the world, whether that is the fact that more and more people are getting out and enjoying the getting out, as apparently the pandemic has been declared over, even though there are some folks that are definitely still recognizing that folks are still getting sick and that there are still some things happening in that health space and all along those lines. And of course, some people are paying attention to the sports world as we are in the middle of both the NBA finals and the NHL finals as well. So I know that in the NBA, it's all tied up at 1-1 with Miami and Denver going at it. And I think it's Florida and Las Vegas. So we've got that whole East Coast and West Coast kind of thing going on in both sports. I'm not sure where the status is in the hockey match, but I know after having watched the majority of the game yesterday that it is 1-1 in the NBA finals. And of course, we've been having some lovely weather here in Durham, North Carolina. Definitely some enjoyable temperatures and good temperatures for getting out and enjoying some of that outside, which we know is also an important part of good health and all along those lines. I know that on Saturday I was out and about, got a chance to go to a event in an area we call our Central Park here in Durham that was kind of a crafts fair and all in that space. It was one of the smaller events because there were several bigger events that were going on that same day, including a Pride Festival, the Beavers pageant, as well as Bembe, which I'm sure drew thousands, if not more, as well as an international festival over there in Raleigh. And there were celebrations around World Hunger Day on a Sunday. So a lot of people were getting out and about. There were even some folks that were taking part in runs because as I am one that gets around on mass transit, I remember the days when mass transit would be communicated with and would know about these runs taking place and everything. But in talking to some of the drivers, one of the things that happened with the pandemic is that that communication has not always been as great as it used to be. So they were rerouting some traffic and I'm sure disrupting some people's schedules because they were apparently not as aware of how the run would impact their routes. And so they had to do some quick hustling and do some rerouting and all in that space. And I'm sure there were some people that got to their jobs a little bit later than they were expecting, since I did hear some people on the phone making phone calls, seeing what can happen in the sense of letting their employees know that they would be running a little bit late because they were on mass transit and it was being redirected. So we do know that stress can be one of those health concerns as well. So that is something that people oftentimes think about. There can be unexpected health concerns that go on in that space. So I've got an amazing guest that talks a lot about the health issues and things around health and all along those lines. So I'm definitely looking forward to bringing her on and having a conversation with Anne Macaulay Leduc. And that sounds like a French name. So who knows, maybe she's got some French background and she can definitely correct me if I am wrong. And I know that too often we don't do a good job of our own personal health care and all in that space. I do know that there are a lot of folks that are not rushing to go to their doctor, to going to their dentist, or going to whoever else they might need to be visiting. As a matter of fact, I'm waiting for a email or a text any minute from my eye doctor, because I did go to my eye doctor and got some new eyeglasses. Sometimes I have the glasses on, but I don't have them on at the moment. They are set aside and all in that space. I probably put them on before I go to work. And of course, I'm waiting for that text with the new pair of glasses, because the old pair of glasses, it's been a minute since I got a new pair. So they were probably hanging on by a thread and would probably be ready to evaporate at any moment if they don't come soon, the new glasses. So I know I waited all of last week and now I've waited a day since that appointment was last week. But hopefully I'll be getting that text shortly and they'll tell me, hey, come on over here before you go to your next job. That I work a multitude of jobs and grab these new pair of glasses that you have ordered and that you have paid for. So hopefully they are on their way. And I do know that I am due for doctor's appointments as well as other appointments that are very important in the nature of our healthcare and all in that space. So I'm going to bring on Ann McCauley on and learn a little bit more about her and what she's all about. I did find her through the wonders of RTIR, which has definitely found me some amazing guests and all in that kind of space. So definitely they do a great job of letting you know who is available for podcasting and everything. And that is a newsletter, the radio TV interview report newsletter that is done by, I believe it's Lauren Healy and Gail Snyder that are the editors of that particular publication. But definitely it helps some of us that are podcasters find some of these amazing people that are able to share their secrets and all along those lines. So like I mentioned earlier, I actually live near a university. I live near Duke University, and Central has some pretty good medical departments. So I know that some people have a fear of their doctor, but you don't have to have a fear. Sometimes you can even get the appointments that you need in free environments. As a matter of fact, when I came back to my apartment yesterday after having worked, I saw that there was a sign that had been stuck in the door about an event that'll be taking place on this weekend. So I might have to take advantage of that. But there is going to be a free health fair not that far from here on Cleveland Street in Durham. And it looks like they're going to give you everything from breakfast to dental care to diabetes screening, cholesterol screening, blood pressure tests, eye screening. And like I said, I've already had my eye test, but they're very, for those women that are pregnant, there'll be pregnancy support, hearing screening, STD screenings, Medicaid enrollment, and there'll even be some physical therapists there as well as a dietitian present. So I know that I've not been eating the most healthy meal, and it looks like they gave those signs on the various doors here in the apartment complex in both English and Spanish. So they do know that there's a decent Spanish population in this particular apartment complex. They want to make sure that people were able to know about this event and go and get some of those important things. I know that folks are not the biggest fan of prostate exams, but that is something that I know as men get older have to be considered as well, because definitely things change in the body and you need to be prepared for those change. Just like I know a lot of women are not exactly rushing, even though it's a good thing to have their breast examined, because breast cancer can be a very serious issue. And I've actually had friends that are in the recovery stage or having it in remission and all in that kind of space. But I just wanted to hear more about your life story and how you got involved in this. You've been having a massive career in the medical field. So were you the one that was always playing a doctor or doing the operation when you were a young child? Because I know me personally, that whole thing about electrocuting the patient, that was me when playing operation. So I knew I was not going to be a doctor and or a nurse, because you would get that lovely buzzing noise. And I'm going like, nope, the nerves are not as strong as steel that you need to have for some of those doctor procedures. So I might want to eliminate this as a job option.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me on your show. And yes, my poor dolls, way back when, they were tortured me trying to be a nurse and a doctor. So here I am, 43 years and then retired. So I had my career and my dolls did live.
They did live, they did survive, and
They did.
all of that space. At what point did you know that medicine was going to be for you? Did you come from a family of doctors, and was this something that was always fascinating to you, or what got you first involved in the medical field?
No, I didn't come from a medical family. I just was always going to be a nurse.
Hmm.
I just knew it. And I went on and became a nurse right out of high school. And then later, I became a nurse practititioner.
Wow.
Mhm.
Well, one of the things that I know is that my mom had a medical procedure not that long ago. Actually, a couple of my family members have had medical procedures. My brother just recently had knee replacement surgery because of a fall that he took not that long ago, and at the young age of early 50s, the fall impacted him more than he thought he would be impacted. So he had to have that drastic surgery, but seems to be doing well with it. And sometimes I am my mom, and I'm sure even my brother, are the kind that will be good patient advocates for themselves. Because I remember one time mom was in the hospital, and I think the doctor was, or the nurse was trying to give her something that was not going to agree with her, and she used that as a teaching moment, and she was basically telling that particular nurse not to give her whatever that food item or whatever that medicine was, because this is the impact that would have on her. And I sometimes think that that is something that we need to have more of, is patients that are willing to be advocates for themselves. And of course, nurses need to be trained and everything. And I think the nurse took it quite well, and she understood what mom was doing. Mom, having been a school teacher and having worked for a nonprofit, she's definitely had some leadership skills. So she used that leadership skill to have that teaching moment. But I was wondering what your thoughts are around, are nurses doing enough to hear from their patients, and are they is that something that more patients need to do, is to be advocates for themselves?
Well, with today's health environment, you need an advocate. You can advocate for yourself, and it's good to have someone else there also advocate for you when you're sick, because you may not remember everything or just be up to par to answer all the questions. And even some of the hospitals now, they kind of advertise, have an advocate for yourself. So that's new.
Yeah.
As far as nursing goes or doctors, we welcome any information that is going to help us not make a mistake. There isn't anyone out there who wouldn't take a few seconds or a few minutes to listen to what someone has to say if it's going to help not make a mistake. Having said that, everybody's in a hurry nowadays in the
Mhm.
medical field, but safety, patient safety is most important, and you have to advocate. Speak up. We want you to speak up. It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I know the book you wrote is The Personal Health Organizer, and I know a lot of times we are oftentimes afraid to see the medical professionals. You know, the dentist has got that drill and everything. The doctors are oftentimes poking and prodding and all along those lines. And I do remember even in grade school being told, you know, you should see your doctor or your various doctors a certain amount of times within every, I think it's once every year or maybe once every 2 years, but definitely try to be on a consistent basis. I know when I saw that eye doctor and it had been 2 years since our last appointment, that they were like, yeah, it's been a minute since we've seen you. So they knew that I had gone past that deadline. But what is your advice on how often should we see our medical professionals? And because I know some people that are, you know, hypochondriacs, and the slightest mention of a ailment, they will go rush to their doctor. And then I've seen the opposite folks that will maybe go 5, 10 years before they see their next doctor's appointment or their next medical provider in the various medical fields and everything. But how often do you think we should see our regular general practitioner, and maybe even in some cases have specialist doctors? I mentioned the eye. I know some people go to their hearing doctor, and even some people that treat the legs and other parts of the body.
Mhm. There are standards that they recommend, and do as I say, not as I do. I have to be honest. I haven't always followed up myself. I said I can take care of myself. But we do need to see our medical people for preventive purposes. And as much as we don't want to go to an office, that's life. It's our health. We're talking about our health, and it's important to go see when they want. So if I'm older, I'm 72. So they say come every year for a medical exam, and the mammogram continues, you know. So there are guidelines. And if you're younger, maybe they say you're healthy, maybe 2 years. Whatever your medical person recommends is really what you should follow. And then you'd feel good about yourself for doing the best you can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
How much has
Does it make
telemedicine played a role in that as well? Because I know a lot of people will not necessarily rush to see their doctor because they figure that, you know, there's this lovely thing called Google and this lovely thing called Wikipedia and this lovely thing called YouTube. So a lot of people will be like, I don't necessarily need to see the doctor. If I'm feeling a certain ache, I can research the ache. And if it is what I think it is, then maybe I'll go see the doctor. And we do know that during COVID, there was a rise in people that were doing telehealth because of the regulations that were out there and all along those lines. So they didn't really have much choice in that matter. But I'm thinking that even in this new era, we're going to see people that are more prone to do telehealth than they are necessarily the in-person visit. So I just wondering your thoughts around this kind of rise in telehealth and if that is threatening the medical profession.
Mm. There is a place for telehealth, but there's also a place for the office. Sometimes people just can't get out of their apartment, and telehealth would be an alternative to nothing.
Right.
And if something's minor, they can do it over the Zoom, but there's nothing like listening to someone's lungs. You can't listen through the computer. You
Right.
have to examine the bodies. And so there's a place for both. I think they're moving away a little bit from the telehealth to more in person for that reason. But
Mhm.
it still has a place, and it probably always will.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see that and everything. What are some of the things that you have found in your long and illustrious career that have surprised you about people's attitudes around medicine and around treatment and even around preventative efforts?
Oh, I've seen it all. I've seen people not want to do anything. I've seen them want some alternative action, which I personally agree with a little bit. And I've seen some want too much,
Mm.
too many pills. Time to cut back a little bit. No, no, we like the pills that makes them feel better. So I've seen the whole thing. Is there an answer? Well, it's kind of individual, Mark. It's depending on the person. Sometimes people have so many diagnoses and they're going to be on a lot of pills, and sometimes it's a little hard to cut them off of a few because they're kind of addicted to the fact that they're on the pills, and then you have to work with them. There's other people that just don't want anything, and you have to kind of convince them that they need a little something. So it kind of depends on the person, and as providers, medical providers, we kind of work with the person.
Yeah, and I know the other thing that happens, and I know that we've had conversations with this on some of our other more kind of contentious shows is that sometimes the folks can get caught up in the notion of the pill being the quick cure and everything. Because as I've oftentimes said, I've yet to meet a kid, and I don't have any kids of my own, but I do have two nephews that are, let's see, 2009 and 2010, so they will be 13 and 14 later on this particular month and everything in that space. So yeah, they'll definitely be turning the one that was born 2010 will be turning 13 in August, and the one that was born 2009 will be turning 14. But I have yet to find a kid, whether it's one of my folks in my own family structure, like my nephews and some of my cousins and stuff, second cousins and others that are in that age range that are not hyper. And I'm not saying that Ritalin isn't something that can be used, but sometimes certain medical professions do get too caught up in that prescription drug, and there are other prescription drugs that I think people get too caught up in sometimes. So, but there are very powerful lobbyists out there that are part of the pharmaceutical industry. So, of course, they're going to encourage us to use that because that's how they make their profit. And I don't knock people for their
Mhm.
profit margins, but I do sometimes wonder if we don't get too caught up in the uh, monetary aspect of the medicine and not necessarily the care aspect of the medicine. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think that there are situations where the medication is first, and perhaps it shouldn't be first. There should be other lifestyle changes
Right.
and encouragement and counseling. All that takes time. Um, it's quicker just to order a pill and say bye bye, see you
Right.
in 6 months. But for real health, real good medicine for health, I think you have to look at the whole picture, and you have to look at the whole patient.
Right.
I, I do. I
I
that's the
definitely agree with
that's
you
the
on
nurse
that.
practitioner way, anyway.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with
So,
you on that. And I've had
yeah.
some friends that are nurse practitioners and that have worked in various aspects of nursing, including some that have even worked with at home care facilities as well as some of the elderly facilities also. So I definitely know the importance of a good nurse practitioner and the importance of that career. As a matter of fact, I think during the pandemic, we saw a lot of folks realize the hero work that a lot of folks do in the medical profession, and did not always get the kind of respect that it should get. So I was just wondering your thoughts on that. Were you glad to see that kind of respect given to the profession when we were in the midst of the hard part of COVID? Because, like I said, I know folks are still getting sick. So even though the government and others may have declared the pandemic over, I don't know that it will ever be over. It might be like the flu and always with us in one form or fashion or another. But we did see a lot of medical professionals get more respect lately, and even saw some people that were talking about how they further admired what the work that nurses and doctors do and all of that. But I was wondering, do you think that that respect is continuing to grow, or is it kind of fading by? Because we know that sometimes in a crisis, people will give respect to whoever's helping with the crisis, and then after the crisis, we go back to our old habits and everything. So I was wondering where your thoughts were as to whether we are continuing that respect of the nursing field.
I think it's a little of both. I think during the pandemic, it really highlighted the hard work that the whole medical field, from the first responders right through to the doctors, what they do and how they did it. And I think with everything, over time it changes a little, and you kind of forget. But I know that nurses have been when they judge who's the most trusted and respected in surveys, nurses come out near the top.
Mhm.
If, well, actually, number one for many, many years. And I don't know lately because I'm kind of out of it now and I don't really look at the studies. But I think that there is always respect for the medical field for everybody, but it was highlighted when they were under duress in the COVID.
Just out of curiosity, what were your thoughts about the portrayal of medicine and particularly doctors from the media? Because I do know growing up that a lot of people enjoyed watching, and I will date myself, and I'm in my early 60s, but they enjoyed watching Marcus Welby
As well
and
be on
a
news.
number of other shows. Definitely even seeing a bright kid that was apparently super smart, but a super doctor and all of that. And I'm trying to remember the name of that show. It was named after the character and all along those lines. But I know he was like a very young doctor and was seen as very smart. And then there was the other show about the neurotic doctor, and both of those titles are slipping me at the moment, even though they were both medical shows. And then of course there was Emergency and a number of others as well. But I was just wondering your thoughts around how doctors have been portrayed historically by our media.
I think it's drama, a lot of it,
Mhm.
for the shows, and that's what people watch the shows for. I used to like to watch to pick it apart and say, no, that's wrong, or what are they doing? So, but I think it's a lot of it's for show. The hard work is behind the scenes.
There's doubt, definitely no doubt about that. A lot of it is for show and all along those lines. And yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure there were some things you were watching going like, there's no way we would actually do that in real life. So I was just wondering if
right.
there was a case about as you were watching old shows that you can reflect on that maybe you saw and you were like, no, there's no way we would do that with a kidney patient or do that with whoever the case may be and everything. Because definitely there was some of those kind of shows like that and everything where you're going like even as a non-medical person you're going like there's no way that that would take place in real life. So I was wondering if there were any thoughts that you could think of in that space with your own practice and your own life.
You mean watching the show, like
Yeah.
some of the, yeah, some of the emergency room shows, and I don't remember the names either. The older we get, the memory goes a little. And I think that those were quite dramatized. I think,
Okay.
um, but it was fun to watch. You take it as it is. I remember watching MASH years ago, and I thought, oh, wouldn't that be fun to be in the MASH unit? Well,
Mhm.
that was totally drama.
Right.
They did that type of medicine, but it was not quite that fun. And so it's for fun, the shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
one of the things that they talk about on those shows, and I just wondering your thoughts about this, and I'm here to bring it up and everything. The show that I was trying to remember with the neurotic doctor was actually House. I knew that if I looked it up, I would be able to figure it out. And of course, he was somewhat of a antisocial doctor, which seems to go contrary to what a doctor is supposed to be, and all along those lines. But within House, there was also a whole conversation between the doctors and the interns, as well as the doctors and administration. So I was just wondering how much of that dichotomy did you find in your own career, where there would be times of a battle between what was good for the patient and good for the doctor, and maybe what was good for the hospital from a bottom dollar kind of stand, because that is oftentimes what the administrators are thinking about. And I know that that was part of the narrative within that particular drama and everything. So I was wondering how often in your own career did you run across that, where there was conversations around the kind of the business aspect of being in the hospital as well as the care aspect.
I think there was that, but we didn't talk about it.
Gotcha.
You saw it. And maybe at the higher levels, they would talk about it behind closed doors, but it was there. It was there. The hospitals have to make a profit. Let's face it, they're a business. And we have to take care of the patients. And there's always going to be a little bit of conflict, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That other show that I was trying to remember that was not coming to me, and I just found it and everything, about the teenage doctor. And it was kind of a cute story, and it was on when a few years after I got out of college. So it was on, got out in late 84. So it was on from like about 89 to 93. But that was the show Doogie Howser, where a teenage genius was actually also being a licensed physician. And I do know that there are some young folks that are out there that are, child prodigies even in medicine. So I was wondering if there was ever a time that you ran across a doctor or a nurse that surprised you because they were so knowledgeable at such a young age. Because we do know that in certain parts of the world, some people are taught at a different age and a different time than we are. So I just wondered if there was ever a time that you went into a hospital and you were like, wait a minute, who is this pimple faced kid? And am I really going to turn over the scalpel and other things to him, and all along those lines? Because we do know that there are some child prodigies even in the medical field. And like I said, I know that was a drama and a fictional drama, but I have lived close enough to Duke to know that there are some young doctors there that are relatively younger than we might expect our seasoned doctors to be, and all in that space. So I was wondering if you ever ran across that and how you dealt with that. If patients were sometimes wondering about the qualifications of said doctors.
Mm. I never ran across anyone of that caliber being young myself in my career, but I'm sure they're out there. And they all look young to me now. I mean, I look at them and say, oh my goodness gracious. So I would say it would be kind of interesting to come across somebody like that. And you're probably a little judgmental when you see someone, but a brain is a brain. So it would be kind of fun to see somebody in real life, but I never have.
Okay, well, that's fair enough and everything. What
Yeah.
are some of the things that you think that we as caregivers, because a lot of times when we are younger, we wind up being the caregivers. Like I said, my both of my parents are still very vibrant and still doing a great job getting around, but they are not spring chickens. Mom just turned 81 last week, and all in that space. And dad, I think, is around 83, 84. So that being said, while he just recently did a art show and is still getting around and still quite vibrant and doesn't look anywhere near his age, and I would say mom doesn't look anywhere near her age either. We do know that as folks get older, that care becomes an important conversation, and sometimes you have to take care of those that are elderly, and sometimes they can even be resistant. I remember that they had a aunt who was fighting MS and everything, and as she got older and the body started to deteriorate, sometimes when my younger brother would try to help her, she would kind of give a little bit of pushback. And ironically, he is now fighting some similar ailments in his own life and everything. But I do know that sometimes the patient isn't always the most cooperative, particularly if it is a family patient. And sometimes we as family members wind up serving as a doctor and nurse as well. So, what is some of the advice that you give to folks about caring for others in their family, particularly the elderly? And then, of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts around children as well. Don't have any of those, but I do have those nephews. But particularly, we'll start with the elderly. What is some of the advice that you give for taking care of elderly patients?
It can be difficult. I've been a caregiver myself, and I think you have to take care of the caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
Take your time to for yourself so that you can give 100% to whoever you're taking care of. I think that's number one. People feel a little guilty taking time for themselves when they have those responsibilities. And I think that's very, very important. I think you have to let the people be themselves as much as you can within safety reasons. Let their personalities be them. And that's sometimes kind of hard because when you're taking care of somebody, you may want them to do it your way, but you have to kind of let them do it their way. It's their life. And as long as it's a safe action, then let it go. The other thing I think is having been a caregiver, it's important to know their medical history. And that's comes back to my book, The Personal Health Organizer, where it start one for your parents before you before they won't be able to tell you anything, and the doctors, you have to, it's a communication thing, and you have to be authorized, and you have to kind of know their history and know how to be their advocate. And the best way to do that is have like a written record. My book did win an award, an international award for caregiving in the caregiving category.
Wow.
So it's something I really, really advocate for people, even for
No,
us as we get older. Who's going to be looking to take care of us, and how can you help them the most? Let them know you're medical. I when I was taking care of my brother, I was shocked at some of the things that I didn't know about him.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I did find out, and wrote them down. But it's important, the communication, the keeping, documenting the history, and having it for reference. They may
Speaking of
forget, and you'll forget.
Yeah, but no, definitely. And speaking of communications and forgetting and everything, one of the things that I found fascinating sometimes is that sometimes when you are taking care of patients, and sometimes the patients are going through different aspects of health, because it's not just our physical health, but sometimes even our physical ailments can impact our mental cognition and a number of other things. I did have a great aunt that before she passed away was dealing with, I believe it was dementia, and dementia might have even been Alzheimer's, but I do know that there were times that she was seeing relatives that weren't there and having conversations with relatives that weren't there. And I know that whether it was my mom or my aunt or other folks, that they just had to sometimes give them that space to do that. Because, like I
Mhm.
said, we don't know enough about the other side of the spiritual world and other things to know that they weren't actually seeing those people and everything. So they could have been having a conversation with folks that were in that space that we might not have understood, because one, we weren't in their brain and we don't know what was going on in their own space. So I think a lot of times my mom particularly, and I think even my aunt and others, would give them space to have those conversations. I don't think that there was a lot of contradiction, like, if the person was talking to somebody that passed away, saying that, that person isn't necessarily here. They would let them have that conversation, and if they sometimes came back into the modern day reality and would acknowledge that that person wasn't there and they were having whatever conversation it was, then they might bring it up at that point, but they didn't necessarily do a lot of chiding and contradiction. And I was just wondering, do you think that that is the best way to kind of handle that? Because we do know that there is a rising rate of people that are suffering from Alzheimer's, dementia, and some of the other things that are loss of memory and all in that space. And I don't know that you necessarily want to challenge folks that are doing that.
Mhm. I think it depends on the patient's personality
Mhm.
at the time, not necessarily what they were, but what they are now, and whether you can reorient them to the present, or is it calmer to just let them be and have the thoughts that they have. It can be a very big battle
Right.
between the caregiver and the patient if you're always trying to orient them and they're just not going to make it there.
Right.
There's anger, there's resentment, and then there's reflex anger on the part of the patient. And it depends on the moment, and it depends on the patient, and it kind of depends on your attitude that day too. So it's fluid.
Yeah, I
Does
definitely
that make
think it's
sense?
fluid. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I
Yeah.
think that's the way my mom and others handle it. Is that kind of fluid situation. So on one day there
Yeah.
may have one attitude and one way of handling it, and on another day it might be something else based on their mood and situations and what was going on in their own lives and everything. You had
Yeah.
earlier mentioned about the records, and part of what your book deals with is the records as well. But I think that probably a lot of us, I know I'm probably guilty of it as well, don't necessarily know all the records that we should know. I'm not even sure that I know off the top of my head. I'm sure I could find some records of around this apartment that would have them, but I don't know that I automatically know off the top of my head my blood type. And even sometimes I mention those glasses and that text that I'm going to wait for. I know that they give me the new test, so I have an idea of what the vision is. But off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you whether it was, you know, 30/20 or whatever it might be without glasses. Definitely hope it's 20/20 with glasses, but whatever it might be in that case, I don't know necessarily what it is off the top of my head. And even sometimes when people ask about your height and your weight, I don't know that I always know that as well. So how important do you think it is to know your basic facts, whether it's blood type, whether it's vision, whether it's your height and weight, or even sometimes your sugar level if you're diabetic? And do you think that I am right that a lot of us in society, not just here in the United States and the West, but around the world, don't necessarily have enough cognitive knowledge or regular knowledge about things that we should be having knowledge about? Because, I'm imagining that if a doctor or nurse is treating you and you happen to be in a fall or happen to be in an accident, that's going to be one of the first questions that EMS is going to ask you. And if you don't know it, they can find ways to get it, whether that's taking a sample or doing other things, but that can be time consuming. And that time that you could have that information to provide them could also be the difference between life and death. But I was just wondering, do you think that a
Mhm.
lot of us just kind of disregard these things that we should probably have at our hands?
I think you're absolutely right. And I had ignored it for years too. We kind of depend on the doctor to keep track of everything.
Right.
But now we have multiple doctors, and you forget things. And I wrote the book because my husband fell down the basement stairs during the hurricane when we lost power, and he ended up in the trauma unit in um, a large hospital. There was no power. They didn't have medical records, and they looked to me for the information. And I didn't have it. I just was beside myself, and even I was even a nurse practitioner at the time. I just couldn't give the answers. And I said, "Oh, if only I had a cheat sheet." So that's why I wrote the book, the cheat sheet, to keep track of the things that you need to keep track of. None of us, Mark, would not check our bank statements, right? Whether
Right.
it's written in the mail or online. You're not going to trust the bank totally with your money, which
Right.
is important to us. Well, your health is our our most valuable commodity. So why aren't we keeping track of it? The doctor's records, they have errors. People make errors in putting the information in the computer. There's things added, there's some things left off. There you're always asked the questions and you just don't have the answers. Why? Because we didn't write them down. So I say yes, we need to. I'm a big advocate for that. And my having taken care of my husband for 3 major illnesses, the first one I had nothing. By the second one, oh, I had a book and I had a notebook and to write down the everyday office visit type of thing, and it made such a huge difference. And the third one skated right through because I already had the system down pat. Makes a big difference taking care of someone else, maybe taking care of yourself. But we have to know. We have to know our health, and we have to take the time to invest in ourselves and write it down. Get the information and write it a little at a time. Doesn't have to be a big deal.
No, I definitely agree with you. As you were talking, I was just thinking about a couple of things that crossed my mind. One is I had the pleasure of briefly of working at a hospital in one of the hardest jobs that I've ever had and everything, because I worked a couple of jobs that were medically related, even though journalism has been most of my life work, as well as event planning and event kind of activities, whether that's a festival or a number of other things. But I did work in the shipping and receiving room of Glaxo. At the time, it was just Glaxo by itself. It hadn't done all those mergers, so it wasn't GlaxoSmithKline. I think it was just strictly Glaxo. So I had the pleasure of working in that office and meeting some of the pharmaceutical kind of folks that were working at that large pharmaceutical company, including some of the salespeople and clinical uh, technicians and all in that space. And then I also worked for a period at Organon Technica, which I think was another company that had some medical ties and all in that space. And then also worked as, and this was a very tedious job. I think it was two tedious jobs that I had that were medically related. One was COVID related and recent, but I did the kind of packaging of pills. So I think that was for Bristol Meyer as a part-time job, and then the other job that I did more recently was actually putting together some of those COVID kits and everything, and that was also very tedious, even though much needed work that needed to be done and all in that kind of space.
Yeah.
But the hardest job that I had in all recently, or not that recently, it might have been about 10, 15 years ago, was working for a transcriptionist and a medical transcriptionist. So it was
Mm.
a part-time job through one of our temp agencies, and I don't know which was worse, trying to understand the medical jargon that is in those conversations and everything. And we do know that quite a few doctors, for whatever reasons, come from various parts of the world, so they would have these very thick accents and everything. So I know that every time that I would go back home, I would be kind of fretting as to whether I got the um, translation correctly, because there were some of these people that were speaking with thick Asian accents and thick European accents, and I think even a couple of thick African accents as well. And I'm going like, I hope that I'm getting this word right, but between it being a giant medical word, because we know that there are a lot of words that are very complicated in medical jargon, or whether it was that accents, it could be quite a challenging job. It's probably why I only lasted it for maybe a month or two, because I don't think that I could put up with it much longer than that and everything. Like I said, to even to this day, I'm not sure how good a job I did. I might be giving myself a C grade, and it might have been closer to a D. But I was just wondering your thoughts as a nurse practitioner, because I was sure, there's that stereotype, and I had one of the worst handwritings of all. But I know doctors are notorious for having horrible handwriting, and like I said, sometimes they can have thick accents as well. So, and that illustrious career of yours, were there times that you ran across those dilemmas as well? And how did you handle those dilemmas?
Yes. Well, yes. My handwriting is horrible. It's gotten worse over the years, so I can relate to that. Sometimes I can't even read my own handwriting. But then we started with the computer, so things were typed out. Accents, whether it was patients or doctors or other peers, sometimes they are difficult. And well, I always admire people that have two languages and
Right.
have an accent. So sometimes you can just say, just gently, can you repeat that, or to try to clarify. And it is hard. And but if you stop and think, could I do that? No, no. So it gives you a little more patience to try to understand. Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with you. And like I said, I knew that I could not do the work that they were doing. So I tried to get as much of that translation as I could. And sometimes
Yeah.
with what I hoped was accuracy, but there were times that I was definitely confused on the translations and on that. And I did a couple of times have to reach out to them and be like, what exactly is this word? Or what exactly are they trying to
Yeah.
say? So try to get some clarity. For those that are thinking about going into the medical profession, whether that was to be a nurse practitioner as you did for those multiple decades and everything, or maybe they think they want to be the next great doctor, or maybe they think they even wanted to discover a cure to something that hasn't been totally cured yet, like a cancer or something along those lines. What advice would you give to somebody that is considering medicine as a career?
It's a great career, but it's not easy. The hours are long. The hours are holidays, weekends, off shift, um, and it's hard. There's a lot to medicine nowadays. From when I graduated from nursing school in what, 1972, uh, it just we know so much more now, and it just keeps growing. So you have to keep up, and it's a hard field, but it's very rewarding. If you go into it for the money, you're not going to make it. You have to have the feeling for the patients, the desire to do it, and the willingness to put up with all the hours and everything else that comes along with it.
You mentioned earlier, and that part of it was the reason you got into some of the later caregiving was your husband. And I don't know if you have children, but I imagine you're doing everything. But how, because one of the things we talk about on this show and a number of other shows here on Pod TV is that work life balance. And it seems to me that that would be one of the hardest fields to have a work life balance because the hours that you've mentioned are oftentimes irregular. There are oftentimes things that are pulling you apart from your loved one and everything. And I think that that's the reason that a lot of times, I'm not saying it's all the time, but I do find that a lot of people in the medical field wind up being with either fellow medical field professionals or fellow uh, people in similar professions that have weird hours like lawyers and other things because they have a better understanding of what is going on than maybe some of the other people in our world do and all in that space. But I'm just wondering how much of an issue was that work-life balance was for you, whether your husband was also involved in the medical profession, and do you find that that stereotype that we hear from some of those dramas is very much true, that a lot of times it is a lot of people that are getting together in that profession because of those weird hours and because of the fact that a lot of people in mainstream society or other parts of society may not have as much passion and understanding for what is going on with the doctors, nurses,
Mhm.
even some of the folks that are doing like the lab work and some of the other fields because they can have some crazy long hours as well.
Yeah. My husband was not in the medical field, but we were together for so many years. We have been that he kind of got used to the routine.
Right,
Um, Especially when I was a nurse practitioner. To say, "Oh, I'll be home for dinner," means I'll be 2 hours late because I'm still seeing patients.
right.
So he just went with the flow. So, and weekends, you just know that you're going to be gone. It's a life. It's a life fact, and either somebody can accept somebody having those hours. Christmas, you work the holidays. Either you can live with somebody like that, or you can't. But it's the way it is. 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, is not medicine,
Right.
and it, you go with the punches yourself as a medical person, work in the hours or whatever, and your family. And it works because a lot of us, we just make it work.
Yeah, you definitely make it work and all in that. Are there any times of the year or times that in your mind it becomes more opportunities for the hospitals to be busier? Because I think I've heard that sometimes things get a little bit busier because of heat stroke in the summer and some of the things that are heat related and all in that space. And I imagine that with the stress of Christmas and everything, that Christmas and the end of the year might be a incredibly busy time for hospitals as well. So whether you're in that Connecticut, New York area, which is where I believe you are located at and everything, or whether you're in maybe a small rural town or some other parts of the world, are there times of the year or times of the seasons that are more prone to be more hospital visits than other times?
Yeah, I think the winter with all the different the flus and the viruses that are out there, different things, they come every year it seems, and the patients are, well, there's more patients than they can handle sometimes. So I think definitely in the winter, the holidays sometimes you see an increase. New Year's, Christmas, those two, for various reasons. Sometimes psychological reasons, and
Right.
sometimes alcohol reasons, and sometimes just because it's winter and there's viruses and illnesses going on. So yeah, for sure. Yep.
Yeah. No, definitely. How important do you think it is? Because I know this one of the conversations I've had with people on this network is um, the importance of whole health, meaning not just understanding the physical health, which is mostly what we've been talking about on this show, but understanding how that is interconnected to your emotional health, your mental health, and some would even argue your spiritual health as well. And I think that those are the four components of health in the general sense and everything in that way. But how important do you think it is for the plan and for the people and they are thinking of a health kind of regimen or a health thing that they want to do to have a connection to all of those aspects and everything?
I think they're all equally important because one can impact the other.
Right.
If you have a severe depression, you're not going to get up and take care of yourself. And there's your physical and your mental. And then it's the same with the spiritual and emotional. It all ties together because we are one big body of all those things combined. And you have to take care of all the parts to function wholly. And I think that's part of the aspect of medicine that probably needs a little more attention.
No, I agree because one of the things that I think that came up during the pandemic, and definitely I think more people are into it, even though I think now we're starting to fall back into some of our old habits, was people started paying attention to their diet, even though I know I'm notoriously bad for ordering out and ordering DoorDash and a number of other things that I know are not necessarily healthy for me, but sometimes it's that quickness and that kind of convenience aspect is the reason that you do that. But that is a negative thing I do health wise. But a positive thing that I do is if I'm going out for a walk, maybe to the bus stop or maybe to just a walk in general, and I will try to pay attention to the nature around me. So if there's a couple of birds that are courting with each other, I might just pause and observe that for a minute, or maybe I'll observe some of the dogs that are going for a walk, not so paying as much attention to the owners as to the dog, or maybe paying attention to both of them and all in that space. But how important do you think it is for us as individuals to pay attention to our diet, but also pay attention to Mother Earth and some of the things that are around us? Because I sometimes feel that we don't pay enough attention to things that can help in our health journey.
Mm. I think we're alive and we should enjoy life and
Right.
observe life and soak it in. And that helps make us whole and happy. Having said that, I think the diet is important.
Mhm.
And I think people can change a little bit at a time. Say one night a week, you cook something new that's healthy and it will grow a little bit. We're all in a hurry sometimes. And don't we all love McDonald's cheeseburgers? Sometimes, sure, why not? We have to live, you have to enjoy. But to start a little bit healthier eating is a good thing. And exercise is something that, well, let's face it, January 1st, the gyms are loaded. By
Mhm.
the 31st, they are 90% empty. That's the
Right.
statistics, I believe it were. And it, we need it. We need the exercise. So if you say, I will do 5 minutes, 5 to 6 days a week, it's a start. This is the way we order medications: start low and go slow. So you start low, do 5 minutes,
Mhm.
and go slow, build it up. Pretty soon, you're going to be looking forward to it. Pretty soon, you're going to say, 5 minutes, I'm going to do five out and five back instead of five total. And it will become a habit. And
Right.
then you just keep going. But you have to start. You have to start, even if it's 1 minute. One exercise video on YouTube. Do one 6 days a week, and then you'll build on it. You'll say, "Gee, I'm going to try another one," and it'll get you healthier. You in?
Yeah, that definitely is. Yeah, definitely. That's definitely important. I think that that's vital. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right because so many people will go rush to the gym because that is one of the number one things that people always have is their New Year's resolution and all
Yeah.
in that space. But then it turns out that they don't do it. I hadn't heard there was as many as 90%. You're right. I have gone by some of the gyms and they aren't as packed. Even some of the cross training outfits and all of those other things that people get caught up in at the beginning of the year. By the end of the year, they're like, that's okay. I don't necessarily need that. And I've even seen that with some of the dance classes that folks there will rush to take to lose weight in whatever way and everything. But yeah, then they found out that there's actual work involved in that process, and sometimes we as a individuals can be very lazy and all along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's where it comes that if you do a little bit consistently, it becomes a habit instead of just rushing out and doing the whole thing and then burning out. But you have to make yourself do that 1 minute or 5 minutes and then do it consistently, and it'll be good. Oh,
Yep, I definitely agree with you on that, and
yeah,
definitely see that that could be something that folks would have to pay attention to, and all along
yeah,
those lines. So I can definitely see that as being an important part of the conversation in that way. There's no doubt about that.
yeah.
So one of the things I was curious about, I mentioned it earlier and everything, was you had talked about, oh, I mentioned earlier your background and everything, and I'm assuming that the last name is of French descent and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, am I correct in that sense? And were you always there in the Northeast, or did you come there from other parts of the world? So was I correct in thinking that you had some French descent of some sort? Because when I was going like the last name, I was like, that sounds French, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll ask.
Yes. It is French. It's my husband's name. So I'm a Macaulay and I am Scottish. And then I tagged his name on. So so that, yes, you were right. It is French. It's called Leduc, Leduc. Leduc. And
It's,
I pretty much New York, New England, and is where I've lived. So
wow. You've
yeah.
definitely lived in a lot of great places and everything. Earlier, we had talked about the children aspect, and I do know some folks, including a dear friend of mine that does a thing called Voice Your Vibes, and he was actually born with Tourette syndrome. So he was definitely a very small infant when he was young and all in that space. But I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about the importance of knowing the good health and the good health benefits for our children as well. Because I know, like I said, I don't have any, and I don't necessarily know the medical records of my nephews, even though I'm going to have to talk to my brother and find out some of those things in case I happen to be in their care and or taking care of them and need to know that information. But I was just wondering your thoughts about childcare and that important conversation as well.
Yeah, I think it's important that the medical records get written for the kids so that, well, if you're not there anymore, they have their medical records written and they will know. Especially, I give them I give a book to as a baby shower gift so
Mm.
that they can start day one and fill it out. Makes it easier than when we're older and trying to go back and fill it in. But I think that's family history needs to get written early while the family is still around so they know. A lot of the testing is done according to your family history. Early diagnosis means early treatment and better results. It's very important. Family history, allergies, you need to know allergies um, of the people you're taking care of and the reaction. What kind of reaction do they have? Penicillin, everybody knows, oh, yeah, I was allergic to penicillin. Nowadays, we can't just order penicillin. We have to know what the reaction was, because if we need to order it, oh, that's not such a bad reaction. I'll chance it because there's nothing left. We need we want the reactions. We need to have that. And it just keep your kids medical records. It's like it should be, and I encourage parents to start it and keep track of the different things for the kids while they're young, and then hand it to them, and hopefully they'll continue it for their life. Does that answer your
That
question?
definitely answers the question. How important do you think it is to know the medical records of those that you are involved with, and maybe you don't even plan to be involved with for the duration? I'm just going to give an example from my own experience. And unfortunately, the relationship did not work out, but I had a friend, even in 61, I'm still in that single space, but I had a friend that I was dating that was the more severe form of diabetes and everything. So I remember one of the things that she did when she came to visit me was actually walk me through the procedure should she happen to have an attack of some sort, so I would know how to deal with that and all in that space. And like I said, while that friendship has petered out, and I've actually lost touch with that particular individual. Actually, you probably need to reach out and see if they are still around just as a friend and everything. But that being said, I did find that that was a very moving moment in my life and everything. And I want to say
Mm.
that was maybe almost 15 years ago. And as you can tell, it still resonates with me to this day that they would sit there and walk me through the procedure, being like,
Yep.
if you're going to be in my life in whatever phrase there's that season, you're in the life for a season or a reason or however that old saying goes, and all in that space. But that being said, whether it's a short term period that you're in their life or a long term life period that you're in their life, there are certain things that you fundamentally need to know about people's health. And if
Yeah.
somebody is diabetic or if they are suffering from different other kind of ailments that are having to have chronic health treatments, then
Mhm.
I think it's something that you would need to make those people in your life aware of. So, like I said, I didn't have any problem, and actually found that to be almost I won't say a badge of honor, but something that showed that they respected me as a friend at that time, that they would be willing to share that information with me, and thought that there might be some future and need for me to have that particular knowledge. Like I said, whether it's for a month or whether it's for
Mhm.
multiple years.
Yeah. Yeah. I give her an A plus plus
Mhm.
A plus plus. Um, I think it's important. I think that people are sometimes afraid to share things,
Right.
although we're getting better at that. It used to be if you had a mental illness, you never would discuss it. And now it's coming out that it's okay. It's okay that you have this. This is, you're getting treated or need help, emotional help, whatever it is you're going through. We're all in this world together. We all have something. And it's good to share. And especially if somebody's close to you, so that they know what to do, they know what to expect, and it builds a nice trust. And I think it's important to know family members. Like I said about my brother, there was a lot I did not know, and I needed to know because all of a sudden I'm taking care of him. So I think the more families talk and friends talk and allow ourselves to be whatever we are, whatever ailments we have them, and everybody has something, and take it from there and share and support and then be safe.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You definitely have that safety moments and all in that kind of space. Now, one of the other things that I found that was
Yeah.
fascinating about your own history and all along those lines was that I see that I don't think there were any children, but that you have the rescue cat. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that story of the rescue cat, because even sometimes I don't know that we pay enough attention to the health, not just of those physical humans that are in our lives, but also those animals in our life. Because I know that I have had, don't have any cats in the moment, but I've had cats in the past. And there's that whole stereotype about giving the cat milk. And I have found out from some of my veterinarian friends that that is actually something that we don't want to do, because many of the cats are lactose intolerant. Not saying all cats are, but many of them are. And we're not exactly doing them a favor by giving them milk and all in that space. But I just wondering your thoughts about the need to know the knowledge and the history of our animal friends as well.
We lost our cat.
No,
We
sorry to hear
our
that.
rescue, but it was such a joy to have one. And when we went, there was a house with 50 rescues, and we picked out two. And it was hard because they're all so cute. And they handed us the medical history. They had it written down. See, so for what they knew, they had it written down, and it was nice. It was important, and I think animals add so much to people's lives. You see the veterans that get the dogs now. It's a wonderful program. And the elderly, when you bring in the animals to the nursing home, they just sit right up in their chairs and they're so excited and they just pop with happiness. Animals are important. And I think keeping them healthy as you can, as we keep ourselves healthy, it's a good thing.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about that.
Yep.
Yeah, you've done a lot of different kinds of medical work. Like I said, we've alluded to some of them working in the emergency room and the ICU, and definitely done orthopedic and cardiology work. Is there a field of medicine that you did not do that if you had to do it again, you would do? So is there something that you had contemplated going into, and you would like to tag on it if I could do it again? This is a field of medicine that I would have liked to have tried.
I think I tried it all. I mean, over the years, I hopped from job to job, and I would be a float
Mm-hmm.
in places. So I would float all the ICUs. I would float maternity and d- delivery. I floated everywhere. So I touched on just about everything, I think. What I did want to do is I wanted to go, it was docked by the time I got out of nursing school, but the Hope, the ship Hope, the good ship Hope,
Mm-hmm.
and go on the Hope and go to Africa or wherever they were going and do that kind of nursing. But I wasn't, it was already docked, dry docked by the time I got out of nursing school. So I guess it wasn't to be. But that type of thing, going into the world and taking care of medicine in other countries, always fascinated me.
Yeah. Speaking of
Yeah.
things that have always fascinated me, and we kind of alluded to it earlier, how do you think we're doing in the sense of the way we treat our elderly, medical wise, and everything? Because I know that a lot of people are concerned about that. And as I mentioned earlier, I have definitely have older parents. I know that as much as possible, they would like it if we took care of them as much as possible, because I don't think that they are the biggest fans, and I know I am personally not the biggest fans of some of our um, healthcare units and some of our elderly homes. Not saying all of them, because there are some that are fantastic and do a great job of keeping the people engaged and all in that space. But I've also seen some that are horrendous in the way that they treat their patients. So I've seen
Mhm.
both sides of the argument and all in that space. But I know that if I was to put my parents in one, one, it would definitely have to be a social one, because they are very much social beings just as I am, and it would also have to be one that was having ways to keep them engaged and all in that space. I know here in Durham we've got a couple of them, like I think Troesdale Country Club and Trayburn and a number of others that have that reputation of keeping people engaged even as they get up in age in that space. But I just wanted your take on how we are doing in the care of our elderly.
Yeah, I think there is a trend now to try to keep people as at home as much as possible. Money follows the person, so that you can have services come into the home and help out. So I think that's wonderful. I think sometimes there is a need that people need to go into a controlled environment,
Right.
especially like with Alzheimer's, through an Alzheimer's unit, because they need 24-hour care, and you can't necessarily have that at home. Some people do have around the clock care at home, but it isn't that common, and the family can only do so much. So there's it's hard. It's very hard. I've worked in a lot of nursing homes, and I've seen how hard the people work for the patients. I've seen the socialization, the good parts of it. Some are better than others. And I think if you get to that point where you have to have your parents in or a family member, um, look at the place carefully and pick carefully. But I think there's a point in society nowadays where sometimes they just need that nursing care around the clock.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you think, because Pod TV is a global network, so how do you think that we in the West, and particularly the United States, do compared to other parts of the world? I know that we definitely pride ourselves on the being leaders in a lot of different fields in the world and everything. But in terms of healthcare, are you satisfied with where we are, or do you think that there are other countries that do it better and all in that line? But I was just wondering your thoughts, because like I said, I hear great things sometimes because of the pay options that exist in Canada and Switzerland and other places. But I'm just wondering how you feel we are doing in healthcare compared to the rest of the world.
I think we need to make some changes in our country. I don't think that socialized medicine is the way to go. I've my sister lives in New Hampshire, and a lot of the Canadians come down to the United States to get the care they need.
Mhm.
Um, that tells you they're not getting what they need. I think we have a lot of disparity around the country. In the urban areas, we have a lot of doctors, and in the rural, not so many. So I think that needs to be looked at a little bit. I think there's a great expense where people are afraid we order too many tests. because we're afraid we're going to get sued if we don't. So that it's really kind of a redo of the whole system. I think that needs to be done. That won't be done in my lifetime because I'm retired. But looking at it as a medical person, there's some good. We know we have an awful lot of good medicine in this country, but somehow we have to get it spread out and confined so that you don't have 3 chest X-rays ordered on somebody and they because they didn't know they had one and or they're afraid because they have a little cold they have to get an X-ray. It just has to be reined in a little bit here. There's a lot of money spent on things that may not have to be.
Yep. I definitely agree with you on that and everything. Another thing is that I know that sometimes people don't always pay attention to the ethnic divides that go on in the world as well, because I do know that there are certain things that are more inclined to hit certain communities than others. And I don't know that the doctors pay enough attention to that, even though I think that they have done a better job over the last several decades, because I do know that there are certain ethnicities that are more prone to like sickle cell disease and diabetes and other things in that space. So I was just wondering, is that something that you think we're doing enough uh, good job of trying to make sure that we understand people's um, heritage and how the heritage can play into ailments? And that's not just strictly an African American thing, because I've also seen it with Hispanic communities and even certain Eastern European communities and other communities as well, because we do know that certain ailments can impact a certain part of society versus another part of society.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we do learn that in school. When you go to nurse practitioner school, you learn which conditions affect different populations more. So I think it's out there, and I think we do pretty good. I think it's just advocating that the patient take a role, accent the health, preventive medicine, and treat what needs to be treated, and have the things available for all that. That's that's where we kind of fall short, that we don't always have the way to help people get everything they need, and the patients have to take us a part of that.
Yeah, and on that same lines, I know that sometimes people, because of history and because of bad things that they've heard, whether that was in the press or things that might have happened historically, like the Tuskegee experiment and a number of other things, I think that sometimes we get too caught up in past fears, and it can put a paralysis on what we should be doing and all in that space. So just wondering how you have dealt with that when you were a nurse practitioner, because I was sure there were times that people were trying to resist you because they had heard this negative thing about this part of society, meaning the medical society, and some of these crazy experiments that used to go on that were definitely not the best experiments and were revealed to be not be the best. Like I know there was even a time that there were people that were doing lobotomies and stuff like that, and that was
Mm.
a real thing and everything. And of course, there were some crazy tests where people were the test subjects for different drugs and all in that space. So I
Yeah.
think that was part of the Tuskegee experiment. But I'm just wondering if you ever ran across people that still had that fear, because I think we saw that even during the pandemic, where people were not willing to take the shot because they still had those negative stereotypes in their brain.
Hmm. It's true, and I have seen people, and it matters to talk to the person and try to tell them what is now, what was. You have to acknowledge that yes, this did happen, but now we do things a little different, and try, you know, and give it a try. It sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not successful.
No, that
But
makes a lot of sense. I know we're going to wind down very shortly, and I'm totally enjoyed this conversation. I hope you as well. But I'm going to definitely give you a chance to talk about the book and how folks can get the book and all of that. And then there's a question that I ask everybody on these shows and everything. But before we get to those two questions, I did love this quote that you have and everything, and I think it's a powerful quote. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about this quote. But I know one of the quotes you had was, I am retired from medicine, but I will never retire from health. So I love that quote and everything. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about that quote and how that came about. Because I'm going like, hey, that's a great, powerful quote, and all along those lines.
Thank you. Yeah, it's true. It's sometimes people want me to talk about medicine, and medicine changes so quickly. You have to keep up with it. It's like, no, I don't know. I'm retired a number of years now, and I just can't speak to that. Um, but your health, now that is always the same. You need to be healthy. So that's where I kind of put my accent on people's health, and let the working doctors and nurse practitioners take care of your medicine and your medical state. So, and I'll always be for health. Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. I definitely like that. Great quote and a great thought there. I was like, that's a powerful quote that folks can definitely relate to and all along those lines. But as I said earlier, I know that the book is definitely done well and all in that space. So one thing I was curious about is what got you to write the book, and did you always think that there was, because there's that notion that we all have a book in us. So did you always know that you were going to write a book? And are there any other health books that'll be coming out as well, or is this a one and done type deal? I mean, it's a one and done quite well type deal, but are there other books that you have in mind?
I never imagined writing a book, and I wrote the Personal Health Organizer out of necessity, and I believe in it. And I was a co-author. 40 women did a collaborative book together, so I did do that chapter. And I'm working on two other books now. They're not medical; they're Christian. And so I guess I've never thought I'd be a writer, but I guess I am. You have to become something else, right, after medicine. So yes, it's fun. But I never was one to take the notes, as a secretary of a club or anything. Oh heavens, no, not for me. And here I am writing every day. So yeah, it's fun.
What was the collaborative book about? You mentioned a collaborative book with 40 women. So that sounds like that would be fascinating, just giving 40 women different perspectives on whatever the topic was. But
It
what was
was
that particular book about?
the title here. It's Voices of the 21st Century. Let me read this too. Yeah. Resilient women who rise and make a difference. So I gave my story. I gave my story of how I went from nurse giving the pills one day, walking down the hospital hall saying, I don't want to give the pills anymore. I want to order them. And at age 51, went back to school to become a nurse practitioner.
Wow. What is your definition of resilience? Because I've heard resilient used in a couple of different ways, but I was wondering what your own personal definition of resilience is.
We kind of persevere, right? So it's, well, say me, I was a nurse practitioner, and now an author. And what's next? We're going to keep going. You keep going, enjoying life and doing what, follow your dream, do your dream.
Yeah,
And
that
the
makes
dreams will change and you'll have more. So go for it.
definitely have to go for it. There's no doubt about that. You also mentioned that you are writing two books that are Christian based. So I was wondering, are these Christian fiction books or Christian nonfiction books? And if you can share a little bit about those books and also your own spirituality and how important spirituality is in your own journey in your own life.
Mm. Well, I'm a Christian. I've been with several different religions within the Christian faith, but definitely a Christian. And it's very important. Help me get through the scriptures, help me get through my husband's three illnesses. I don't know, what I would have reached for in the moment that he was so very ill each time. Um, so the one is fiction and one's nonfiction. One is I'm taking it's a court case.
Mhm.
It's with the Christian sins to court. So that's my fun little fiction. Sounds a little odd, but I'll show you after. I'll send you a copy when I
Yeah, please send me
finish.
a copy because as you were saying that, well, one, I did go to a Jesuit university, and I remember the screw tape letters written by C.S. Lewis, and that was one of our courseworks, and a number of other things. And I was, as you were saying, that it was the sins going on a trial in a fictional standpoint. I was like wondering, is this going to be a class action suit where they all go to trial together? or along those lines, or does each one get a separate trial? So does like greed get a trial? Does gluttony get a trial, or do they all get have the trial together where all of the sins are being tried at the same time?
Each has its own little trial.
Okay, so they have
Yes, with its
individual.
own little verdict, and there is a judge.
So each of the
Each
seven
of the
deadly
sins.
sins gets its own. And are you only sticking with the seven deadly sins, or we go with all the sins? But does each
Um,
of these sins get its own trial?
each sin will have a little trial within one jury to deliberate on all of them. You know what I mean? And one judge, and I'll keep my same lawyer. And yep. So it's all it's kind of real, the sins of life,
Mm-hmm.
and it it's gotta put them on trial. Gotta put it on trial. Are they guilty? Are they not guilty? Are we guilty? Or are we not guilty?
Well, I mean, that
It's a
raises.
work in progress, but
It sounds like a work in progress, but it raises some very interesting
fine.
questions because I'm imagining that anybody that is hearing us talk now or in team replay is probably going to be like, wait a minute, they're sins. They've got to be guilty. So if you somehow have a twist in there that a sin exists that is not guilty, that would probably upset the apple cart in the mindset of a lot of people because I'm imagining that everybody's going to think that each one of the sins has got to be found guilty, but maybe there's a sin that gets acquitted. But like I said, I have not read the book, so you can maybe give us a hint. Does a
Yeah,
sin does one of the sins get that manage to get acquitted or at least pardoned or something along those lines? Because I think
maybe.
most
Maybe. Yeah. I
you
think
see,
there's two sides to every sin. Like say a little white lie. A lie is a sin.
right,
Is a white lie a sin?
good point. So, so
Can
that might
you can you kind of acquit on that? Yeah. Lying isn't one of the sins I've gotten into yet. I'm not sure exactly how many I'll end up with in the book, but it, is everything we do wrong? And but in the end, what's the final judgment from the judge and how do we fix it? It's kind of a
Yeah, like I said, I'm getting all kinds of crazy thoughts that are going through my head. I'll definitely have to catch the book and everything because I know that you said that you are Christian and along those lines. I consider myself more spiritual than religious, and part of my reason for saying that is that I find some religion, not saying all religion, because I'm not going to condemn an entire group of people, whether they be Christian, Muslim, or whatever. But I do think that some get caught up in the cult of personality and the cult of buildings and some of the status symbols, and that's where I tend to lean more toward what the books were about, meaning the holy books and all in that line, and definitely what the message was supposed to be about. Because I do think that they sometimes get caught in the cult of personality, and also, and this is where some Christians disagree with me, but some don't, is that kind of my way or the highway attitude of certain parts of Christianity. And I'm not saying all parts of Christianity because I just personally think, and this is my belief system. And like I said, I'm not in a rush to find out. And hopefully it'll be decades before I find out and everything. But I think there might be some shocked visitors when they get up to heaven, if they manage to get up to heaven, because I think some people that were not expected to be there may actually be there. Because I think that in my mindset and the way I was taught, the higher power God looks at the entirety of the life. So I think that there might be some folks up there that might be surprised when people get up there going like, I didn't think you were going to be up here. You did X, Y, and Z that was bad in your life, but the person that would know the the entirety of the book of life might be but that was only 1/100th of their life. The other 99/100th, they were doing some very positive things and were doing some very other things that you were not paying attention to because you were too busy caught up on that negative part of what they were doing. But that's just my own personal philosophy, and I don't know if you necessarily agree or disagree.
um I believe in the Bible of what it says, and the Bible says that we don't get judged on what we do because we
Right.
will ask for forgiveness and our sins are forgiven. So
Right.
it's not how you live your life or the good deeds you do. It's whether you believe in Christ
Right.
and that He died on the cross to absorb our sins, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through me. So if you don't believe in Christ, then you won't really get, you have to believe in Christ to get to God, because God is pure and perfect, and you have to be forgiven by Christ to get there. That's what I the Bible says. So that's what I believe. But I know it took me a long time to come to that. Um, I wasn't born with that knowledge, and it was a late conversion, totally.
No,
So that's how I believe it.
no, I
Um,
can definitely see that, and I can definitely see that belief system and everything. And the only counter that I would give to that is that there are, even in this day and time, parts of the world that don't necessarily have the same access to some of that messages that we are talking about. So that's what I meant when I said that there are still some folks that, in my mindset, and like I said, I don't know that I'm right, and I could be way wrong, that may have not had the chance to get the message. And I think that they still have an opportunity, because I think that that is one of those cases where God may look at the greater picture, at some of the work that they did in the part of the world that they were in, and whether they lived a quote unquote Christ like kind of life and everything. Because I know
mm.
there are still some people that are doing some great work that might not have had the chance to read the Bible or read some of the other great Christian works that are out there. And I don't know that they would necessarily be condemned if they didn't have that opportunity. But that's just kind of my own philosophy and my own thoughts.
No, I think you're right though, Mark, because the Bible says that the word, it has to go throughout the world, and you're judged on what you know,
Right.
and at the mentality that you can absorb it, accept it. So they won't be judged if they've never heard about Jesus or God or anybody. They won't be judged because they haven't heard the word. With the computer now, everything is getting everywhere more than we ever thought it would. But people will be judged on what they know and accept, and and He knows what's in people's hearts
No, and
most.
that's what, yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah,
There's more of what's in people's hearts and where their hearts are, and all in that space. So I would definitely agree with you on that.
yeah,
And just
yeah,
like the uh, certain books have been written and reinterpreted, that is one of the dangers of the computer age as well. Is
mhm,
that I think that there
mhm,
are so many renditions of even some of our greatest works that even some of that has been kind of corrupted as well. So I'm not even sure that the versions that are put out there are always as correct as they can
right,
be, because there's all kinds of interpretations. People have taken parts of it and used it to justify things that we know were way unjustified, because we saw definitely parts of the Bible that were used to justify slavery or to justify this war or that
yeah,
war. I mean, we've even seen people that have used parts of the Bible and part of Christianity to justify what is going on in Ukraine and Russia and all in that space. So we've even seen it in modern day times
mhm,
as well. And I don't know necessarily that that is was the original intent. And even after, if Jesus had passed and the Bible was written, there was different camps of the way it was written. So it's that there's a lot of distortion that we probably won't understand till we get to that
till
next
we get
level
there.
and
Yep,
get there,
yep.
and then they'll reveal the truth of what is going on with the
That's
Bible.
right. That's
That's
right. The
probably
main thing is to get there,
the main thing
and
is
we'll
to get
find
there.
out.
Exactly. I agree with you
Yeah.
that that
Yeah.
is the main thing, is to get there. One of the
Yes.
things, just to get out of here and to talk about as we wrapping up and all in that line, is that one of the things that I try to do on all my shows is, one, tell folks how they can be reached and how folks can learn about these powerful books and all in that space. So, oh, we didn't get to the other one, which is the more non-fictional one. So, what is the non-fictional
Oh,
book about?
nonfiction is one that I'm um, starting. Let's see, how will I put this? Um, it's different chapters for different behaviors that we do, and how to fix them according to the Bible.
Okay.
That, yeah, is kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay,
Mm.
so like basically looking at it like if somebody is um not doing the right thing diet wise, maybe some advice that was in the Bible that can help them on their diet journey, or if they are maybe drinking too many sodas, there's something in the Bible that could help them in that journey. And that was just, or maybe watching too much TV. That, and those are just three that popped into my head, that there might be a Bible verse or something within the Bible that can help guide them in that journey in order to become the better human being, is what it
Yeah.
sounds like.
Yep. Yep. And things like anger, dealing with anger. I mean, it's everywhere nowadays. So where do we find help to deal with that? That different. There's a lot. There's a lot we can learn.
Well, there's totally a lot that we can learn. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things is that definitely some of the people that are within the Bible, whether that's Jesus or Moses or a number of others, they oftentimes went to areas that I don't think we go to enough of and everything. I had the pleasure of hearing Reverend Barber speak along with Bernie Sanders, and they were talking about how we oftentimes don't even address things that are very common in society, like poverty, even though poverty is very much in the Bible, and how that should be something that is addressed. I think there's that whole quote
Hmm.
about what are you doing for the least of these, that we
Yes.
don't necessarily address even in some of our sermons. As a matter of fact, I think one of the things Reverend Barber said, it is one of the least talked about things that in our many of our sermons, when it should probably be one of our most talked about things, but we don't necessarily do as much of that as we should. And I do agree with you that there's a lot of division and needless division and everything, because I think you
Yeah.
can agree to disagree with somebody, but it doesn't mean you have to divorce or separate from them. At the
Yeah.
end, you can just
Yeah.
agree to disagree, but there's a lot of the politics of division where it's kind of like what we're talking about with Christianity, but there's a thought that, outside of Christianity, where it's my way or the highway kind of
Highway.
attitude, and at some point there's got to be some respect
Yes.
levels where you will acknowledge the other person's side, whether you agree with them or not. But it doesn't mean that you have got to cancel them or divorce them or do some of the other radical things that we've seen going
Yeah.
on a number of issues.
Yeah. Agree to disagree. Yep.
Right.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
And that
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
yeah, we
Yep.
got to have more of that. So
Yes.
definitely, I'll be looking forward to getting
Yes.
both of those books and everything. If folks are interested in getting those two books, as well as the book on health and all in that, and the health records, as well as the fourth book that we mentioned, the four books total and everything, the collaborative book, where would they go to find your information, and how would they reach out to you if they have been fascinated by this conversation and want to learn more?
Oh, very good. Thank you. I have a website, personal hyphen health hyphen organizer.com. And I have information up there. And then there is like 12 questions you could ask your doctor. You should ask your doctor. Keep in mind when you go to an office visit. You don't have to ask them all the time, but it's there for your reference, and they can download that. Um, my book, The Personal Health Organizer, is on Amazon. And my name is it's difficult, as you know, to pronounce, never mind spell. So the best way to find it is go to Amazon Books, Personal, and type those two things in, ANNE, and then my Personal Health Organizer for your medical records will pop up. So that's that. The other book I use just for speaking, the collaborative book,
Mhm.
and so that is not available. And the other ones are not published yet.
Right.
I'll be looking. My publisher passed, so I will be looking for a new publisher. But by the time I finish writing them, I'll find one and I'll send you a copy of both of them.
Yes, please do. What are some of those 12 questions? You mentioned that earlier, and I meant to get back
Oh,
to
let me
that
see. I
earlier.
have that here somewhere. Okay. Well, some deals with your medications, your diagnosis, your illness. Um, Say if you're ill. One question is there anything I should refrain from while I'm ill? You get home and you say, well, gee, can I drive? Can I do this? Can I do this? Ask when you're there. And what can I do to hasten my recovery? Self care. What can you do? these are questions to ask when you go in ill. For your diagnosis, can you simply explain my diagnosis? If you get a new diagnosis, I can't tell you how many times I've been with a doctor, we do rounds, doctor leaves, and the patient says, "What did he say?
Mhm.
What's wrong with me?" They don't understand it. And
Right.
okay, simply, can you simply explain to me those types of things? That it's okay to ask questions. Just get when you get to an appointment, don't chat too much. Don't ask him how his trip to Greece was. That's it might be interesting, but it's not going to help you take better care of yourself while you have your bronchitis. So and so there's others on here to ask.
Yeah,
Do they
those are
have
some great
handouts? Yeah.
those are some great questions and definitely some important ones. And yeah, we do sometimes get caught up in the minutia of what they have done and everything. So I mean, it's fun, and yes, it can be part of good conversation to know how their kids are doing or where they just went to and all in that space. But sometimes
Yeah.
we are so caught up in the outside appearance of what the doctors are doing that we're not paying enough attention to our own diagnosis and how what he is saying can impact us just because we're fascinated by their lifestyles. And
Yeah.
because sometimes
Yeah.
doctors are almost
Yeah.
seen as the lifestyles of the rich and famous and all in that space, even though, as I know, some of the times doctors, depending on when they went to medical school and depending on where they are working, are not necessarily always making the tremendous amount of money that sometimes people stereotypically think that they are making, because we know that they also went into school with a tremendous amount of debt and they are not always as paid as well as they could be paid and all in that space. Not saying that there aren't some doctors that are doing quite well, but there are also a lot of doctors, and I mean a lot of doctors, that are struggling. I'm sure that you can relate to that, because I'm sure that there were times that you were sitting there going like, if folks only knew how much I'm struggling to get my groceries and other stuff going on and everything, but they're thinking because I am a nurse and because some of my friends are doctors that we are making hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And I know that that isn't always the case. And I know that a lot of times those debts are oftentimes taking decades to pay, just like they took at least a decade to get, because it is a long process to go from undergraduate through medical school. I think that the minimum amount to be a doctor is at least 8 years, and that's if you go straight through the 4 years of undergraduate and the 4 years of medical school. And if you're going to specialize, I would imagine it's even closer to 10 to 12 years. But you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I'm thinking that if you add that up and if you're doing it all for student loans, that's a whole lot of money.
That's a lot of money. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think absolutely you're right. Yeah. Depending on the specialty, some make more than others, but
Right.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that's
most people they're not doing it for the money. They want to take care of the patients.
yeah. Most people are
Yeah.
doing it because they have a desire to do some common good in society, and that is their drive. I think for many doctors is that they want to make their difference, and they see medicine as a way to make a difference. And you also have some that are very ambitious and are hoping to not so much ambitious in the financial standpoint, but in the sense of hoping that they can discover that thing that was always perplexing them. Like I know that there are some doctors that lost people to cancer or lost people to other diseases that are still taking folks like AIDS, and they are hoping that their research can find that cure that will save the lives of those
Yep. Yep. Oh,
Gotta love technology, but it has its moments as well, and all in that space, and all in that kind of way. But yeah, I was just saying that definitely you have those people that are in that passion reason for doing what they do, and all along those lines. But definitely, and you have been a great guest, and I know we're getting ready to wrap up, as I've said a couple of times. But the other thing that I do on this show is I'm very much about positivity and hope. Is something that I try to do on all my shows, and I know, as we've alluded to, that a lot of people are frustrated by what they see in the world and are hoping that there are ways that we can make it a better world. So I've kind of taken it as a personal project to get all of my guests in one more form or fashion to give a message of positivity or hope to our global community, because we are heard in about 200 or so countries around the world and all in that space. So any message of positivity or hope that you would like to share with our global community here on Pod TV, I'm sure that folks would love to hear your thoughts around that and all in that kind of way.
I'm positive, I'm hopeful, and I just hope that everyone can feel those moments in the way the world is right now. We can change the world one person at a time. So if each of us feels, okay, let's be positive, hopeful, and do something good for somebody, it's contagious. And maybe we could spread more love and peace in the world. I think that would be my message. As far as health goes, you can do it. You can know your health, and you can change your health, and you can write down your health. But we can do this. We can do this, and it's all part of a positive health attitude as well as a positive world attitude.
No, I definitely agree with you. You got to have that positive health attitude, and we definitely got to do a better job of that. We all need to have those records and need to do a continuous job understanding both our own health, but also the health of those around us as well, and probably have to go make those appointments, no matter how much we may be dreading those appointments, because I think that sometimes it is the fear of what may be going on that is the reason that people avoid going to the doctor, because they may have a feeling of blase or a feeling of whatever, and they're afraid to find out that is what is going on. And a lot of times those fears are not necessarily based on fact, but they're just based on our own trepidations and our own kind of things that are going on in our head. And then we get to the doctor and get a clean bill of health, and then folks are like breathing sighs of relief when they should have probably done it years ago, and all in that space. Because I do know that sometimes we allow our own fears to stop us from doing things that are necessary, and all along those lines. Because I know every time, and I just saw mom last week, that's one of the first questions that she usually asks is, when was the last time you saw your eye doctor? When was the last time you saw your regular doctor? When was the last time you had that prostate exam? When was the last time you did this or that? Because we know that there are exams that you are supposed to get as you get older, because they are more inclined to happen in the older ages than they are in the younger ages. But definitely, whether it's the prostate for the man or it's the breast cancer for the women, those are the mammogram. Those are things that we all need to probably be doing on a regular basis. And a lot of times we are worried about going, and sometimes the cost is also a factor, because I know some people don't go to the doctors because they're afraid that they can't afford the doctors. But as I mentioned earlier, there are teaching hospitals, there are clinics, so there are ways that you can get at least the basic knowledge without necessarily having to go to the doctor or the dentist, because we do know that some doctors or dentists aren't exactly the cheapest in the world either. So that, but there are some other options that are out there for you. And like I mentioned, what was going on here at the beginning, there are screenings that you can have some of that done even at public events and all along those lines. And I know that sometimes even employees, because I know when we were physically into the office at Measurement, a test grading place that I work at, they were doing some things in that space. So they would bring in like some surface screening medical folks, and they also did a CPR training. And ironically, I think that this particular apartment complex is doing a CPR training not this weekend, but the following weekend, because definitely too many of us do not know how to do CPR. And in this day and time, we probably need to have more people that are aware how to do those kind of procedures as well. So it's always good when there are these attempts to help give you those kind of skill sets that you may not have or that you need a refresher on, because it was probably about 5 years ago since I did the CPR with my um, work environment, or one of my work environments. So I will definitely try to be making it to the one next weekend so I can, maybe get a refresher course in what I learned in that. And plus, there might be new things that were not the same as they were 4 or 5 years ago that they will be teaching us about and everything. So if you could, maybe as we get out the door, if you can share the importance of going to some of these screenings and what some of the ones that you wish more people would pay attention to. I mentioned some of them, but you may have others.
I think all those screenings sound great. I think it's wonderful that your community is having that. And I think there needs to be more. Maybe there will be now that COVID's kind of over,
Right.
per se, and people can get out and and know their numbers, know their health, know it, write it. Yep. And get out and get your appointments. And it's you may be afraid of what you're going to find, but it could, like you said, Mark, it could be nothing. Or early detection means early treatment, and you'll be fine. But you have to get there, and we
Yeah,
can do
that's
this.
very,
We're positive. We can do this. Positive for our health.
that's very true. And that early detection can be what leads to the cure, whereas the later detection, it may be too far into the ailment to actually help. So sometimes
Yep.
that early detection is essential, because if you don't
Yep.
get it early, then it might hurt
Yep.
you getting it later when it is gone beyond the treatment stage and all in that kind of space. So that early detection is
Yep.
very vital. I know one of the things that one of our sponsors talks about is good. So we're going to go out of here with a commercial from my friend Shawnee Smith, and she's about trying to get people some healthy spices. So she's got her own company called Can Do Spices. So we'll get out of here with Can Do Spices and all in that space. But before I put it on this commercial, if there are any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience, I will give you that full floor to do that. And then after you say whatever you've got to say in closing, then I'll play Can Do Spice and we'll call it a day on this particular radio show with Mark Lee. But I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I hope you'll come back and join us on some other conversations as well.
Well, I love the conversation also, and I thank you very much for having me. I think I like your positive love aspect, and I think if we all just go forward with our health and with positive love, we'll be fine. And I wish everybody healthy lives out there with lots of love. And thank you, Mark, for having me.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.
Another fascinating conversation. We're going to get on out of here, but we've got other programming coming here on Pod TV. We've got the All Around Show coming at 6 o'clock, and we've got Maxine talking about definitely business tips and definitely having that kind of living your best life kind of thought. And her show will be coming at 7 o'clock, and there are a number of other shows during the course of the week. As a matter of fact, on Tuesday, we'll be having a couple of shows that folks will be interested in, including our regular Tuesday and Friday show about the Ukraine, Russia, and China situations that are going on that Sasha Starr does. And of course, we've got World Edition every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. And there are a number of other shows that are part of this network as well. So I know I'll be back on World Edition tomorrow. And of course, I'll be on our other show that I do regularly on Wednesdays at 4, that being the online dinner party. And I love that name. It's kind of like if you invited a number of friends around and y'all just had a conversation that covered the spectrum of a number of issues, like you would if you were having a dinner party at your house and invited both friends and strangers to come and share a meal with you, and all in that space. So that's kind of the theme of what the online dinner parties are all about. So I know in one show we had a pretty locally famous actor, Ira David Woods, and many people know his daughter, Evan Rachel Woods, who is definitely a Hollywood actress and all in that space, and a tax accountant. And it turns out that the tax accountant used to work in the acting field. And of course, any good small theater needs good tax advice. So that was a case of some cross conversation that took place and all along those lines. And I'm sure I could think of many more that have taken place on that show. So it's always a fun conversation that takes place on Wednesdays. And of course, we've got some other shows that'll be coming up throughout the course of the week. And we've also just recently launched Pod TV Chatter. It's in the beta stages, so it hasn't been fully launched to the public, but it should be coming out on July 1st to the public. So it is our answer to some of the division that goes on in social media, and a chance for people to agree to disagree, but still have some casual and wonderful conversation. So that has been launched here on the network. And of course, we're now getting some of these shows on Spotify and iHeart and other radio outlets as well. So we're just doing what we can to be a voice within that media landscape, and a powerful voice within that media landscape as well. So in getting on out of here, I'm going to play a commercial from my friend Karen, who talks about some of the work she does in voiceover work and all in that space. And then we'll get out of here and have another exciting radio show with Mark Lee on next Monday at 2 o'clock. And of course, I'll catch y'all on the online dinner party at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. And of course, y'all will see me popping in and out of World Edition and other shows as well. But we're glad to have these amazing programs. But right now, let's check out what Karen's all about. And then I've got to run over to the Cultural Arts Center that I work at, because I think we've got African Dance for Women on this particular day. So I've got to be there by around 6. So I've got a couple hours to go over there. But let's check out this particular voiceover work and what she's all about. Matter of fact, I just recently signed up for some voiceover work facilities that I had signed up years for, but I hadn't done the maximum plan. So now that I've done a bigger plan, I won't say it's the maximum plan, but a bigger plan, who knows? Maybe I'll get some voiceover work, but I'll keep y'all informed as to how that goes. But let's see what Karen's talking about.
The only trick you need to save time and money is to shop at Aldi. Aldi. Shop differently. Limitless length plus volume. Sensational from every angle. New Lash Sensational Sky High Mascara. Only from Maybelline, New York. Everything that touches your baby should be this comforting. Pamper Swaddlers. The #1 choice of hospitals is 2 times softer. All right, Trivago. Find me a hotel somewhere in Thailand where I can wake up with a view of the ocean. Awesome. The future. It's impossible to see. And when it's finally here, it might not be what you'd expect. It might just be better. Introducing Luxury Electric. Introducing Lucid Air. We're for those who love to discover, who don't need to travel to find something new, and who know when you spend less, you can discover even more at TJ Maxx and Marshalls. Smooth, velvety chocolate wrapped in precious gold. Ferrero Rocher.